Did you know that in the past 3 years, Amon-Ra St Brown has been wide receiver 3 in PPR scoring? The past 3 years, 3 years in a row, he has finished as wide receiver 3. That is an excellent stretch. But when we think about wide receiver tiers, he's still often on the outside looking in. JSN ahead of him, Puka ahead of him, Jamar Chase ahead of him, and then kind of CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson this past year were ahead of him. After 2025, it's starting to become more of Amon-Ra St Brown at the top of that tier. But right now, there are some people who would still take Malik Neighbors over him just based on age. And I think there's a lot of room in the market to get in on a guy like this. This is the Dynasty Market Report, where we look at a specific asset in Dynasty Fantasy Football, a pick, a player, and we track real trades that have been happening to gauge what is the market for this player. Because one of the best ways to make your Dynasty team better is by making trades. And we all want to be buying low and we all want to be selling high. But what is low? What is high? So we're going to look at some real trades and figure it out. Now, I've gone through a lot of these trades, and what I've seen is that people aren't fully valuing Amon-Ra St Brown where I think he should be. Jared Goff is still going to be his quarterback. There is a new offensive coordinator coming in for the Lions. I think things are not going to get back to the heights that they were during the Ben Johnson era, but if they're a top 10 offense going forward, the Lions, there's still a lot of room for great production from Amon-Ra St Brown. He's not that old. He's 26. He's the same age as Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, players like that. They're all within 1 year of each other, 26 to 27. Same thing with CeeDee Lamb. But I think a lot of people would rank Amon-Ra at the bottom of those tiers, like we were saying before. So there is opportunity to get in. Let's take a look at some real trades that have happened with Amon-Ra St Brown. And unless I say otherwise, like I've been saying, this is a trade that happened. Someone sent Amon-Ra St Brown and a 27 first, and they got JSN. I would take the Amon-Ra St Brown side of that deal. If you remember back to last offseason, JSN was a league winner for a lot of people because in redraft, we were taking him at the 2-3 turn. People were saying he's a good young receiver, but I don't know if he's going to take that next step, and then he did. What we want to do in the offseason is open up our range of possibilities. Amon-Ra St Brown has been wide receiver 3. There's nothing saying he could not be the wide receiver 1 on fantasy football. There's other guys that we like a little bit more than that, but if you can get a 27 second round pick to move your odds of having the best wide receiver down a little bit from JSN, you can use that 27 first with your own 27 first to bring in another player like what JSN was last year. I have JSN on some dynasty teams. I paid 2 firsts for him last year. So if you can make some deals like this, move on from the top option to the 5th, 4th, 3rd best option and pick up a first round pick that you can then use to combine for another young player who could be great. You take that 27 first and pair it with not that much more to get Ladd McConkey, who could have a great breakout. That's the type of move I like making. Here's another deal. Someone sent Breece Hall and Zay Flowers and got Amon-Ra St Brown. Those are both good players. I've made a video on both of them. We'll put the cards up on the screen. I'm not sure which side they show up on, but you can check out what I think of Breece Hall and Zay Flowers. I like them both. I just also really like Amon-Ra St Brown, and if I can combine them into him, I would be. Here's one just for picks. And if you can get any sort of deal like this, not just for St. Brown, across the board, someone sent the 101 and they got the 103 in Amon-Ra. You could have me move the 101 for the 103 and another player, and it doesn't need to be anywhere close to Amon-Ra St. Brown. This is just a massive value win. Each year, we don't necessarily get the 101 right, especially if you're trading within season. There were plenty of times this past year in 2025 where you could have gotten more for Emeka Egbuka than you could have for Ashton Genty. Right now, Omarion Hampton is just barely behind Genty, and we might get into the season into October, November, and see that Hampton is better. We don't know that for sure, so we want to keep this wide range of outcomes available. If you go a year prior, the first picks in our rookie drafts would have been guys like Caleb Williams over Jaden Daniels, or Caleb Williams over Drake May. I'm not sure people feel that way now. It was also things like Marvin Harrison over Malik Neighbors, or Marvin Harrison over Roma Dunze. And in this past year, you could have gotten those guys People would have wanted those guys more than Marv. So we miss all the time. So if you can go from the 101 to the 103, you're not for sure getting the wrong guy. And you get Amon-Ra St. Brown on top. I would love that deal. I feel like we're talking about this kind of more ridiculous deal, but any player could be thrown in there. Here's another deal. George Pickens and Devontae Adams, and someone got Amon-Ra. You're losing 2 slots. You're going from 2 players down to 1. Maybe you can't make up that production, but Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to be around for a while. George Pickens had a great year, but we've seen a lot of George Pickens being George Pickens. And we don't know exactly what's going to happen again in 2026 or that his career will last that long. If we have to predict one type of player to have the next kind of burnout diva not get a next contract or fade away more quickly than you thought, that would be George Pickens. And Devontae Adams is likely in his last year in the NFL, maybe 1 to 2 more years, but not much more. So if you could just swap that down to Amon-Ra, I like that deal. The last one that we'll look at where we're clearly taking Amon-Ra St. Brown, someone sent the 108 and the 112, ship it. I'm gone. Give me Amon-Ra St. Brown there. Here, I found some more even deals where I could make the swap depending on my team structure. And we'll talk about those. Someone sent Amon-Ra. They got the 101 and Kyle Monungai. And when I do a split like this, going from what should be the best asset, St. Brown, I want to know that both sides of that split, or both of the players that I'm splitting to, could shoot up in value. So we could see Jeremiah Love go to a great team and be excellent in year 1, and then be more valuable than St. Brown. And we could see Kyle Monungai have a great breakout in his second year. Maybe they move on from DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monungai is the lead guy and someone else comes in to pair with him and he becomes worth a 1.5 firsts, or kind of into that Chase Brown borderline running back 1, running back 2 tier, or even just gets up as high as someone like Isaiah Pacheco was a few years ago, where you're borderline getting a first for him. That's a deal where I could move on from Amon-Ra St. Brown if I am a rebuilder and I need to get assets that have opportunity to go up in value. So that's a deal I could make. And then here's one that's pretty even. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Alec Iamanor for CeeDee Lamb and Emmanuel Wilson. And I'm just going to break this into 2 smaller trades and say, give me CeeDee Lamb for Amon-Ra. That's fine. It's just a different name with great production. They're very similar in age. They produce both really well. I'm going to call that even. And then that second trade of Alec Iamanor for Emmanuel Wilson, give me Alec Iamanor. Here's one trade that I found in the database from the past couple weeks where I'd be fine moving on from Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I kind of prefer the other side. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown, Joe Burrow, and Harold Fannin for Brock Bowers, Nico Collins, and the 102. Now, if you've made it this far, there's a good guess you've liked this video. So if you wouldn't mind, hit like, make sure you're subscribed, and leave a comment for something that you might want to see in a future video. So in this trade, the way I break it down, I'm looking at it more specifically now, is Amon-Ra St. Brown for Bowers is pretty close. We can start to make a wash there. Burrow for Nico Collins, give me Joe Burrow. And then Fannin for the 102. I think that the 102 is just way, way more. So even if we're saying, that one's pretty obvious. We're saying Burrow and Bowers kind of cancel each other out. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Bowers somewhat cancel each other out. Burrow and Collins, I like Burrow more by a bit, but the difference between the 102 and Fannin is so much more that I would take the Burrow, Collins, and 102 side there, and then just have a little bit more liquidity with that 102. So that's going to bring us to the end of this video here. If you're looking to see more about Brock Bowers, we've got that as another one. We just released it yesterday. The link will be on your screen somewhere here. There should also be a link to hit subscribe if you've made it to the end. Thank you very much for watching all the way this far, and I will see you in the next one.